SADC chair of the Organ of Peace, Politics and Security Cooperation in Namibian President Hage Geingob has concluded his meeting with King Mswati III of Eswatini. Eswatini is one of the hotspots identified by SADC as it seeks to restore peace in the region. President Geingob met with King Mswati III at Manvolo Grand Hall at Lozita Royal Palace at Matsapa. Both leaders have reiterated the need for the promotion of peace through dialogue. The Kingdom of Eswatini has been facing a number of protests due to the growing pro-democracy movement there. SADC mediators have been trying to bring stability and peace to the kingdom. We speak now to Dr. Siphetfo, who's the General Secretary of the Swaziland Liberation Movement, Swalimo. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us once again, Dr. Dlamini. What have you heard on the outcome of those talks, and what exactly was on the table?
Good evening to you, Siphetfo, and your viewers. I must say, firstly, Siphetfo, that the situation currently in Swaziland really is a situation that can be described a lot of uncertainty that's happening, particularly politically and economically as well. There's a lot of economic decline. In fact, it's a nation that I will refer to as one that has been controlled by an invisible force. We will remember at some point that there was a two-day a breakaway where the country was in standstill because of an invisible and unknown, so-called commander who basically, issues out instructions to Mswati, to whom fortunately he gets to be really listened to. And that really kind of explains to how power has basically shifted from the current government. But basically with regards to the talks, and the president of Namibia's visit, who is kind of the chairperson, I must say that we have heard from prevailing sentiment, in fact from a statement from SADC, that the reason mainly the chairperson was here was to basically consult with the king. As to the extent of that consultation, really one is looking forward to those outcomes. But in particular, the visit was basically also informed by the need for a peaceful and a stable, SADC, and talks along the lines of the situation that's basically happening around the country. We look forward basically to look at those resolutions, if there won't be any resolutions, that will look into getting Eswatini back to its peaceful place, and in particularly allowing a national dialogue to take place.
Just perhaps let's reflect on where the situation is at the moment in terms of those pro-democracy protests. They may not necessarily take the form of, on the streets, outcry, outrage all the time, but obviously the movement is still growing from when we last spoke. What is the situation? What is the strength of the movement? And did you see that, the growth of that reflected in the talks, do you think?
Yes, if I hear you very well, I think you're referring to the current situation and then the stance thereof of the movement, or maybe also the broader mass democratic movement as a whole. I must say, so that currently the government totally has lost its grip on running the country, and their entire institutions of government, of course. A country has been run through, the barrel of the gun, and the king continues, to use, ammunition, grenades, and tear gas in order to, not give Mswati, that access to find themselves eventually in a national dialogue, and therefore it's saddening, particularly if there are a lot of lives that are lost currently. Some people are not going to work because of fear of victimization. It's just a country which is currently in a state of chaos. And our position really is that we're not going to stop demanding democratic reforms and constitutional reforms. It is imperative for us to continuously, fight for these democratic rights of the people, freedom of expression, and many other important universal rights that are basically, recognized, globally. And therefore, for us, it's important to continue with the fight until, of course, we see visible elements of a national dialogue.
So I realize the line is not the very best, but what I was saying is that SADC mediators have been doing their best to bring about meaningful dialogue. Do you think, as you were just explaining to us, the growth of the pro-democracy movement is being reflected to the discussions with the king? Is that being impressed upon him that it's not something that's going away?
If you were to repeat that, please, Siphetfo.
Do you think SADC is able to relay to the king in their discussions that the pro-democracy movement is growing and that this ought to be recognized?
Yeah, look, I think indirectly, maybe the question is the effectiveness of SADC in this case, which has always been questioned. And I think one knows for a fact that, interestingly, SADC has been perceived to be one of those organizations that have quite a number of doubts in terms of solving, conflicts and bring about, effective conflict resolution strategies, and most importantly, swiftly implementing its resolutions. And therefore, I do want to believe that, there's quite a number of other elements that brings forth, such doubt in terms of, the organization being able to intervene and swiftly deal with the issues. We remember that we come from a long way. It's been a year already, and the chairs of the organ of Cholka have already been revolving. We remember Sri Ramaphosa was there in the beginning, somewhere around October last year, and there was a special envoy, of course. And now we have, the president of Namibia also trying to have, discussions with the king. And I think this really does give, us a picture that SADC really should be an institution that should be looking at itself to see to what extent can it really find itself, being perceived on a positive, stance in terms of being capable for, bring about a positive conflict resolutions, strategy, particularly in the Kingdom of Swaziland. And therefore, I think the question that we may wish to be asking also could then be that does SADC trust itself as a capable organization in swiftly dealing with conflict, particularly in divided societies? So yeah, despite all that, there are hopes that the president of Namibia, who is the current chair, brings about positive discussions, particularly discussions that will, involve the engagement of all other stakeholders.